Hello, football fans. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morassutti, and you're watching Football Talk. Well, CFL Football Talk, but we will talk about both. I mean, it's a great time to, it's like the playoffs in the CFL. We have the playoffs in the NFL, and we're nearing the end, David, of the football world period for this season, and that, of course, is the NFL Super Bowl. But first, let's start with a couple of bits of news in the Canadian Football League. That is usually our focus, and we might as well start with that focus right now, but I promise we'll get to the NFL talk. I guess two things have happened since our last show. The first is the schedule's out, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's good. Everyone's been crying for one.
And now they got it, and now they can plan their summer because essentially that's how it works. So we don't have to get into deep, go drill down too deep about the schedule and what's wrong with it. We've still got some good football talk to take care of, so we'll worry about the schedule after the Super Bowl. We'll do that. And we'll talk more about the important news. The CFLPA has released a statement, David, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read the statement so there's no confusion. The CFLPA strongly protests the CFL suspension of Lucius Purifoy under the league's performance-enhancing drugs policy and the handling of related communications. This includes potential breaches of Mr. Purifoy's privacy and rights under the collective bargaining agreement and the CFLPA drug policy, as well as the Edmonton Elks' decision to release him shortly before the suspension's announcement. Lucius Purifoy is a 9-year CFL veteran elected to the CFLPA representatives, held in high regard by his peers. His leadership and dedication to the team speak to his character and professionalism. This harsh treatment of a union representative raises significant concerns about fairness and respect within the league. It says here on August 24th, Mr. Purifoy drug tested detected Adderall, a commonly prescribed medication for ADHD. He openly addressed this result and participated in comprehensive medical evaluation, including a psychologist's diagnosis confirming his condition and establishing a medical basis for prescribed treatment with Adderall going forward. Despite this, the CFL instructed the Edmonton Elks to not apply for an emergency therapeutic use exemption, otherwise referred to as 2, which would allow and has allowed an independent medical review of this case. Instead, the league chose a path of ensuring suspension, disregarding relevant medical facts. The CFL's public stance on mental health is contradicted by its actions in this case. Rather than supporting a player facing a verified medical challenge, the league's approach has caused unnecessary harm to Mr. Purifoy's reputation and career. The CFL stands firmly with Lucius Purifoy, the CFLPA, I should say, stands with Lucius Purifoy and his family members, his members, advocating for fairness, transparency, and policies that prioritize well-being and rehabilitation over punitive measures. I should have read that before, but we just saw that. I just saw that and decided to talk about it. Well, David, you get first shot at that. What do you hear and see, knowing what you know, and now what you've heard from the CFLPA?
Well, I mean, it just speaks to, you know, we assume certain things when we see a player has been suspended and then it gets released. It's like, well, that's not very good. But then the CFL there has been a lot of challenges, I think, to a lot of these suspensions. And I think this one right here is one that I think the CFL is realizing, okay, we really got to go to bat. And this is for something that's it's a disorder. It's we're talking about a medical condition. We're not talking about a recreational thing. This is for medical reasons. And I think this is first off, this for the CFL to put this on the ban list, or in their eyes put it on a list to be banned. That's a little harsh in my opinion. So I think what happens here is with all the different steps that the league's involvement in this and the team's involvement, it just hasn't looked very good in this regard. And so I think this puts also Purifoy in a bad spot because now he's looking for gonna be looking for a new job, right? And hopefully the CFLP is able to push this, right? And maybe this is something that they can maybe get overturned, and it'll allow Purifoy to go into the season not having to worry about it.
Okay. What I'll say firstly is this is the CFLPA's opinion, and this is a statement
Yep.
by them for Mr. Purifoy. They state their side of the equation, his, in representation of him. They have told us a couple of things here, which I think have bearing. This emergency therapeutic use exemption, which is referred to as TUE, I'm sorry, speaks to there is an opportunity for a player, depending on the drug and the reason he's using it. If it's strictly a medical thing, that's what this sounds like, right, David? That, you know, he should be given time to if he can say that and then say, here's the proof that I'm using this for strictly medical reasons, and to your definition, not for entertainment use or just for recreation, right? And their statement that the CFL has moved on in the way they did without offering him that, and then basically telling the Edmonton Elks that they were going to suspend him, made a suggestion. That's from the CFLPA's perspective. I'm not sure how true that is. I don't know if it's word playing a little bit. I don't know, because you can be honest and tell the truth by the words you use, but sometimes those words don't add up to what really is going on. So that's why I'll be very careful here to not attack the Canadian Football League without knowing their side in this situation. So far, their side is that they suspended him, and they suspended him for the reason for him taking these drugs. Now, the CFLPA has said, well, there's a reason for him having taken those drugs, and you have an out for people under certain circumstances, and they feel like he hasn't been given the opportunity to deal with those. And the oddity here is how Edmonton, David, do you find this odd that they released him before the announcement?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a very hasty decision on their part. And like you're talking about, the exemption that they told Edmonton not to apply for. Like, it just seems very odd in that regard. Like, was Edmonton trying to find a way out of this contract, his deal? Although I don't think so. I mean, he's a good player, but it's just a very weird situation with all this. So it's just strange how this kind of all played out, and you can see why Purifoy is going to push to fight for it.
And he has that right, and the CFLPA has a responsibility to help their players through situations that their players feel are unfair. Now, that doesn't mean, and we've seen before where there have been suspensions, and the CFLPA has not disputed anything and allowed it to go through. While not approving of it, they've accepted it. In this case, not only did they not accept it, they didn't approve of it. So this is going to be interesting. You know what they say. Hold on for the next part of this story. This story is not over yet, and we'll see where it goes. I think we've pretty much described the situation, David. We've offered our opinion. At one last opinion, is there a PS postscript that you want to add to this subject before we go?
No, I just hope it's not something that drags out too long for Purifoy, right?
Absolutely.
And hopefully it means he's not out of the league,
Yeah, and Godspeed to coming up with a fair resolution of this. If this is how it goes, hopefully it'll be resolved based on the concerns that everybody has, the player, the CFLPA, and the league and team themselves. The next thing I wanted to talk about is there's a new running backs coach in Saskatchewan, and he's teaming up with a former teammate in Toronto.
Yeah, it caught me off guard. Like I saw the picture. I follow AJ Willett on Instagram, so I saw him post a picture with Andrew Harrison. I'm like, why is he posting a picture with Andrew Harris? And then I see the announcement that Andrew Harris is joining the Saskatchewan Roughriders as a running backs coach, and I'm just like, oh wow, who's going to tell Winnipeg Blue Bombers fans this? Who would
Well,
have
he did
thought?
go to Toronto. I mean, as far as his dedication, required dedication to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, it kind of is in limbo. So I don't see why. Um, I get what you're saying. He's a Winnipegger, a former Winnipeg Grey Cup champion. In fact, the last time they won the Grey Cup was with him on the roster. Um, they haven't done that since he's left. I don't think. Right? They didn't win a Grey Cup after. Oh no, they did once.
Uh,
Once.
ever since he left, they hadn't won a Grey Cup.
Yeah, because he came to Toronto and they won the Grey Cup his year here with Toronto, right?
Yeah. So
Right.
when he came to Toronto
He was
in
a Grey Cup
22,
champion.
they
He was a
won,
Grey
and
Cup
then in
champion.
23, they didn't win.
Right.
So because he spent 2 seasons in Toronto. Won the first time, didn't win the second time.
There we
He
go.
went three. I think it was 3 Grey Cups in a row.
Yeah. One with well no,
Two
actually
with two
two with
with Winnipeg. I actually said sorry.
five.
Yeah, sorry. It would have been 3 in a row.
Yeah,
2019, 2021, 2022.
right. And the point being that he's now turned up. He had a really good relationship with Willett.
Yeah, there was a 1-2 punch.
And also when he was hurt, he instructed him and coached him up, helped
Mhm.
him become a better running back.
Absolutely, yeah, he did. And we kind of knew with Andrew Harris that coaching was going to be the next thing for him. Now, I wouldn't have suspected that to be in Saskatchewan. I thought maybe in U Sports, maybe somewhere somewhere closer to home because he was living in Ontario. So clearly, there was an opportunity in Saskatchewan he couldn't turn down, right?
And he didn't.
And
So
good
good
thing
for
he did.
him. And good luck to him and of course his buddy Willett. Um, I guess the next thing I wanted to talk about is the speed and fullness of which CFL teams on their negotiation list or their players list that they're extending. Now, I'm going by the CFL.ca because I trust their their research and documentation. And I'll say this: Montreal has extended 13 players, Saskatchewan 10, Ottawa 11, Winnipeg 9, Calgary 7, BC 6, Edmonton 4, Toronto and Hamilton 1 each. I don't know if that number means anything. It's just something I throw out there. It seems to me Montreal, Saskatchewan, Ottawa, and Winnipeg are trying to sign their players a lot quicker than the other teams. That's what I draw from that, if you want to call it statistic.
Well, I think when you look at teams right now making these moves, they're trying to do it so that they know what they have and what they need. Right? They need to know. Okay, do we have? Is this player black? Is that player back? Do we now have to go find a replacement for this guy? For this guy? Like that's what a lot of these teams are doing. And some teams have more free agents than others, right? As well. Toronto does have quite a few, so that's why hearing only one has been re-signed. Do you like to hear a little more if you're the reigning Grey Cup champions? But we also know that this happened the last time Toronto won. Quite a few players left because quite a few players got pay raises. But it's not going to be easy to get a pay raise because I don't know how many teams will be calling for some of them, but not all of them.
Oh no, that absolutely. We see it every year where there are players that test the free agent market and end up signing with their original clubs. Um, that's something the Argos are more than willing to provide their players with the opportunity to do. And we know from talking to Coach Dinwiddie, he is fully cognizant of the fact that players could ask for more money, but he also is also equally cognizant of the fact that players like to win, and he does believe in that as well. That he doesn't have to pay a player because or be a part. He's not the general manager officially, but he does have some input he doesn't have to pay a player just because they want more money. At the end of the day, they have a full volume of players they need to fit into a basically. Who was it that referred to it as an envelope? Oh, yes, Danny Machocha. He referred to the cap as an envelope. He only has X amount of money in that envelope, and he's only got that much to distribute. So how much of this money does each player get? He knows he only has that envelope of money. It's limited, and he knows he can only spend that much money. So the Argos are they're very ready to bring in new players. You pointed it out. I've witnessed it, and we've seen it. We've seen it be something that doesn't interfere with success either.
No, and you have to be ready to find. And one thing Toronto has done, we've seen it. They find players. How many players have they found that they brought in?
A few teams do that, yeah.
And now go to other teams or go to the NFL, right? You had Ralph Hawley, you had Mackay Polk, and one more that that have gone down to the NFL, right?
You have me at a disadvantage.
Like, there's a reason this management group has found ways to find these players in areas maybe that others haven't been able to, right? And so
absolutely,
and they're willing to make moves on the fly, right? So
they're definitely not shy, that's for sure.
No, and look, like the Cameron Judge move, that's oh yeah, Ralph the Argos are not afraid to go and make moves, right, when they feel it's necessary.
Absolutely. And
so
they've made moves that are necessary.
Yeah, so I think you've got to, you got to really look at, with the way that the league operates, how much player movement, you have to be willing to make the tough calls. You really do. And be ready if players get better opportunities of it elsewhere.
Absolutely.
The Argos also have another problem, and that's their coaching staff.
Yeah, that's the biggest
as
problem.
much as we talk about the players, coaches are another one. I don't know if you saw.
Go ahead.
But a few days, I think it was a few days ago, it was reported that the Blue Bombers were granted permission to interview Mike Miller for their offensive, basically to replace Buck Pierce as their offensive coordinator. Toronto's lost Demetrius Maxey to the Elks. He went back there. Will Fields went to Ottawa. Now you could lose Mike Miller. We haven't heard anything about Kevin Iben yet. Again, Toronto's had to do a lot of this sort of things.
And let's also add just a little bit to that. The Argos did give permission to Winnipeg to talk to him.
Yeah, look, it's tough to deny somebody a chance at a promotion.
And that's exactly what the Argos have said publicly.
Right. Yeah, Dinwiddie's made it clear that you can't deny a player or somebody a chance to move up.
To better themselves. And he said everybody's looking to make a better life for their family, and a promotion means more money. More money means more to share with your family, and who wants to get in the way of that with anyone?
So, but that's not the only player that's being interviewed. We do know that Montreal's pass game coordinator, reserve coach Mike Leonello was interviewed. Kahari Jones was interviewed. Jarius Jackson was interviewed. So, like, it's not a slam dunk that Mike Miller will go. No. Because he's got to see this as obviously a step up, and the defense coordinator usually is. And but for Toronto, it's like you're kind of hoping that you at least retain one of them. That's someone. Mike Miller has been a very big presence with the.
Well, some of us feel his absence in the Grey Cup the Argos lost 2 years ago had a lot to do with it. Some of us feel that way.
Yeah, it's true, and we've heard Chad Kelly speak speak wonders. Even Nick Arbuckle spoke a lot about Mike Miller,
Absolutely.
and that's that was a new presence for Nick Arbuckle. He didn't have Mike Miller the first time he was
Hmm.
in Toronto, right? So
Hmm.
there's a good coach there. That's, again, you got to get used to that. You got
And
to
the
get used to
problem in Toronto is that to separate the money, they need Dinwiddie to be involved deeply in the offense. So
Yes.
they can't compete, in other words, dollar wise,
No.
with Winnipeg. So if money's what Miller wants, money's where he's got to go, which is it'll be Winnipeg or somewhere else. Now the question is, does he want? He's not a younger guy, right? If I remember correctly, he's not a younger guy. He's in a part of life where I think enjoying life is important as much as having a job that's very challenging, right? Maybe.
Yeah, he is. He is up there in age, but yeah. Again, it all has to make sense at the end of the day. For
Well, take it from an old guy. There's money's not that important. That's what I'll
it's
say.
opportunity and challenges in a lot of ways too.
Yes, and environment, right? The quality of life when it comes to being on a team for everyone involved, the quality of life is not just dictated by salary. Now, salary is, it is gravitationally pulling on situations. But if that's not your priority, and if you want to be on a winner, you might be willing to take a little less. If you want to have uh, a kind of life that you've become accustomed to and want to maintain, you won't leave a company or a team just because of money. There are all these things, but the important thing here is that Miller has established his value to the Toronto Argonauts, to the players that he's responsible to, the quarterbacks in Toronto, and he needs to be thanked for that. And I know Argo fans are very grateful for his presence on this team. And anybody that knows anything about football and offense and quarterbacks wouldn't mind him being involved in their team. And that team, in the case of Winnipeg, I'm sure his fans are well aware of the Toronto Argonauts having a couple of Grey Cups instead of them. And this guy was a pretty good driving force in that.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about the Canadian Football League? Free agency's not here yet, so we don't have that to talk about. We can talk till we're blue in the face about the players that are available. We can do that next week. We can do that a little bit more about that next week. But this week, what's important to me is live football. And we have some of the best football in the world, almost as good as the Canadian Football League. The NFL, pretty good football. I guess it's worth watching. It's worth paying attention to. And while we do that, we hope to be entertained. David, what's the first takeaway for you for entertainment value in the NFL playoffs? What jumps out at you this past week's games?
Well, it kind of proves don't sleep on Kansas City, which I did, a little bit. Did I choose Kansas City to lose? I didn't see them as Super Bowl contenders. I did see them winning this game because Houston, I was never. They are making too many mistakes, and their offensive line just isn't good enough, in my opinion. You look at that game, especially. Mahomes could have his worst game, but that defense picks him up. It's not even a defense where you say they've got elite talent all across the board. Steve Spagnuolo remains one of the more underrated defensive coordinators in football.
When he gets a head coaching job, everybody's going to say, "What took so long?"
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy, right? And I look at just that game. You see Houston just they had opportunities. Their defense played so well, gave them opportunities, and the offense couldn't pick it up. That's the frustrating part because even against the Chargers, like they didn't play great against the Chargers either. it was almost like who doesn't matter who they were playing. It was going to be a tough. It was going to be tough to beat Kansas City. So that to me wasn't surprising. The surprising one, the Lions.
Oh my God. And you know, well, hindsight is a beautiful thing, right, David? I mean, hindsight's
Mhm.
pretty important. You know, Washington beat Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay had 4 turnovers. This Washington defense they remind me. I want to say this, and then you please correct me if I'm wrong, but this Washington defense reminds me of Toronto, the Argonauts, on how they disassemble an offense and make an offense all of a sudden just disappear. I mean, literally disappear, and become a non-factor. To me, this Washington team uh, really feasts on, I think, creating mistakes by the other team.
Yeah, no, it's a team that's not playing scared.
Not at all.
Dan Dan Quinn went into this game and realized if I'm going to beat Dan Campbell and the Lions, I can't be timid. I need to be aggressive. Fourth down, fourth and short, we're going we're going for it. He missed the first one pretty bad, but then 3 in a row after that they converted. And what that did was it did two things. Kept Detroit's offense off the field in those situations. Okay, they got to control the time of possession, and it was a bit of a message sending move to say we are not going to let you dictate how this game goes. We are going to come after you, and that's what they did. The deep shot, but that Detroit defense. I know they had injuries, and they're going to use the injury tag for this one. But man, that was pitiful watching that defense play.
The offense, watch the offense play against that defense.
Washington's offense, it's funny because it's a good offense. I didn't think it was that good. Like that was another level.
I think the kid did a pretty good job.
Oh yeah, Jaden Daniels was ready for that
He
moment. That's for
was
sure.
he was mistake free again. You know, he keeps doing this. You
Mhm.
know, he doesn't lose the game for his team. I talk about that all the time when it comes to the Canadian Football League and quarterbacking. The best thing you can hope for from a quarterback, if they're not experienced or they're not your number one, you just don't want them to lose the game. But that guy has one heck. I love his arm, David, and I love how he can scramble and throw. You know, it's Doug Flutie, in my mind
Mhm.
when I see the way he plays, the way he can run, and you know, a lot of other great quarterbacks since and around now. That quality permeates the NFL right now. We're seeing more and more quarterbacks like that whose legs are half the game for them.
Well, that's it, right? You look at the quarterbacks that are in the final four. All four quarterbacks
All of them,
have the same traits. If they
or
can't
abilities.
find a play downfield, they'll move it with their legs. Now, maybe Mahomes doesn't do it as much as the other three, and Jane Daniels likes to stay in the pocket too if he can, but they all will run. They all will run if they have to,
Because they
uh,
can.
because they can. Although one of them, I don't know how much running he's going to do. Jalen Hurts, he's hurting.
Yeah, he looked like he took a pretty good lick in there, and you know, there's some hits that happen because a quarterback, you know, they made a whole movie about it, Blindside. That, you know, quarterbacks can be very susceptible, which is why, you know, they need to be careful. Like we saw here in the Canadian Football League. Sorry, I can't seem to get the Canadian Football League out of my head. I apologize, NFL fans. We saw it happen with the number one quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts in the semifinal. Now, it didn't hurt them. Their number 3 quarterback from the start of the year carried them to a victory in the Grey Cup. But the NFL, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the NFL has backup quarterbacks as a rule that can replace their number one quarterbacks, David. I don't know if they've if they've worked that out since the fiasco with San Francisco in the playoffs, I'm sure they're all aware of it. Nothing that series, that loss by San Francisco doesn't point to. I'm sure the NFL organizations are trying to do something about that. But David, the quarterbacks we're talking about, they're pretty unique.
They are very unique. They're quarterbacks that frankly, you know, I mean, you look at all of them, all of them except all of them high picks within the first 2 rounds of the draft. Josh Allen first, he was, I think he was in the top 10. I think he might have like 7th overall. Jane Daniels, we know, 2nd overall. Patrick Mahomes was a top 15 pick, and I think Hurts is the only one picked outside of the first round, but he was picked 2nd round. He was picked quite high, right? You know, you always hear you don't need to select a quarterback in the first round to be successful. Then you got look how many quarterbacks in the first round are going far in the playoffs. It's almost like every year the scale tips in the NFL, but all 4 of these teams are where they are right now because of their quarterbacks. Maybe in Philly, I mean, right now they're trying to discredit a lot of what Jalen Hurts does because he has Saquon Barkley there, but you need a quarterback. You still need the quarterback. It doesn't matter where you have a running back. You don't have a quarterback, you're not going far in the playoffs. So I think, look, this is coming from a Cowboys fan. I'm giving Jalen Hurts a bit of credit here, okay? Never thought I would do that, but
he deserves it.
Yeah, he does.
So the Lions lose. The depression for that fan base, for the coach, for Campbell in the post game. Oh my goodness, was he hurting? And it comes down to and he was very clear. The offense and the defense did not help each other out, and that game was determined by that disconnect between those two parts of their game. In the NFL, it isn't like the Canadian Football League. Again, back to the Canadian football. This guy won't stop. Special teams in the NFL isn't really as impactful as in the Canadian Football League, especially because of the rules that they've made with kickoffs and such, right? And short, short kicks are, you have to predetermine them, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. So it's not as impactful.
Yeah, and that onside kick attempt by Baltimore is so pitiful. But that's where the NFL is right now with this because of the rule changes. It's either you got safety as your priority or entertainment. That's why I still think CFL owns the game when it comes to special teams. But I mean, the NFL's had an entertaining playoff so far. At least I'll give them that.
Absolutely. The next game, why don't we stay in the NFC and talk about LA and Philadelphia? I'm not saying, David, that I expected LA to win, but I am going to say that Philadelphia has proven the past few years that they're a team to be reckoned with, and in the playoffs they succeed. They haven't. They've got, man. I'm looking ahead. I'm sorry. I'm looking Philly, Washington. Philly, Washington. Oh my goodness, two teams that really know each other. So that's going to be interesting. I was disappointed in LA. I'm not saying that I expected LA to win at all, but I am disappointed in the way they played, in my opinion.
The defense was disappointing for LA. You gave up 255 yards on the ground.
Yep.
And the reason why you lost that game were chunk plays. It was like, almost like, here, Saquon, take the ball and run. Here's a hole, go and run. He
Stop
had
when you like.
runs of 62 and 78 yards.
That's a game's worth of my yardage.
Running backs don't even get to 70 yards sometimes.
In a game.
Holy.
My goodness, that was amazing. Philadelphia, full value for it. Don't get me wrong.
If the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl, Saquon Barkley could have the most yards in an NFL game in an NFL season combined. He's at 2,218 yards. Terrell Davis, when he was with the Broncos, has the record at 2,476. So realistically, you're looking at what 260, about let's say 270 yards he needs. He just had 200 and 205. The Washington Commanders did not play well against the run against Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs. And no offense to Gibbs, but Barkley is a better running back.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever happens, if they make it to the Super Bowl, that to me gives me a reasonable belief that he could do it. But that's where, if I'm the Rams, you're just like, man, if we only could stop one player, put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands more, you'd have more of a chance. Now, let's also remember, the Eagles had a bit of an advantage when it came to the weather. That was a factor. LA is not used to playing in cold weather. Absolutely. And that defense also gave LA a lot of problems. You're talking about quarterbacks being banged up. Matthew Stafford looked banged up too.
Okay. Well, so we got Philly and Washington representing the West. Let's go over to not the West, the NFC. And we'll move over to the Western home team of Kansas City. I guess here's what I want to say, for whatever we haven't said about the KC victory over the Texans. This was another game that Kansas City should have lost. This was another game that they won that they shouldn't have won. I think we've said that in total 100% seriousness this year, this coming from a Kansas City fan, at least 6 games this year they could have lost. 6, at least 6. I count 6. This makes 6 that they could have lost.
Frank, I had so many people after this game come to me and say they just can't keep getting away with it.
And they do.
They keep getting away with it. And they do. Because you know what? Teams like this know what they need to do because they've been there before. But guess what? I also think the Houston Texans got screwed the pooch by the officials in this game.
There could be.
When you have a Hall of Fame quarterback in Troy Aikman, a quarterback saying Patrick Mahomes got the referees to help him out with that penalty call. I don't know how you call that a penalty when the two players hit each other. they went for Mahomes and he slid late. What is a defender supposed to do? Let him go? They could have, but they hit each other. And I'm like, how? Matthew Stafford got popped in the head full out when the Washington Commanders were running back the interception. He got a headshot. Nothing. Patrick Mahomes got grazed. And it was a 15-yard penalty that set up a touchdown. If they didn't call the penalty, it would not have been a touchdown on that drive potentially. I'm not saying this is the only reason why Kansas City won, because Houston made some brutal mistakes. They couldn't protect their quarterback. 8 sacks, that is unexcusable for a team to allow their quarterback to get sacked 8 times. Their quarterback had to get helped off the field. That's how bad he was getting hurt by the Kansas City Chiefs. But I'm sorry, one quarterback should not be getting as many favorable calls like Patrick Mahomes is. I understand he's probably one. He's he draws calls, but there was one point in the game where he was running to the sidelines, and the player was making sure he went out of bounds, and he took a dive. I'm like, this is disgusting, right? You see a guy. I know you're a Kansas City fan, so it's hard for you to hear this, Frank.
Oh no, it's not hard for me to hear at all.
He took a dive. He got called out for it by a Hall of Fame quarterback, and the refs after the game defended their decisions Because guess what? That's what they're going to do. They're not going to admit that Patrick Mahomes is getting some favorable calls, but we know he does, Frank. We know he does.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't get favorable cause help, and that's part of the cause, I guess, of them winning when it's so close. But it doesn't just seem to be the officiating that's on their side. I've seen too many times this year, too many times in Super Bowls that they've won. The other team has done things for Kansas City. Twice they should have had touchdowns, David. And all the receiver had to do was to receive the ball. That's all he had to do. He just had to catch the ball. There was no outstretched reach. There was no, it was a simple, basically, on the last one at least anyway, it was just basically the dynamic of trying to catch the ball and running backwards and having basically get turf heel and miss the ball. That's the way I thought I heard it explained. Do I disagree with it? No, because I don't know any better. I've never been on an NFL field playing pro football. So when I hear a guy like Aikman say something like that, you go, okay, well, dude's probably making some sense. Yeah, I think you're probably right that they got favorable. He gets favorable officiating. It's almost like basketball because he's a star player. I don't like that. Can I agree with you wholeheartedly? Not wholeheartedly, but like 80%. I'm on your side with that KC got a break from the official. But I think they got bigger breaks from the other team on mistakes that they made that you cannot make on your way to winning a Super Bowl.
No, the fumble, the two fumbles that they had in this game, the one that Jackson had early in the game that eventually led to a Buffalo touchdown, inexcusable. You can't snap the ball bad. Then you're the quarterback. You pick up the ball, eat the play. He didn't. He tried to be a hero. He did what Josh Allen has always been criticized, trying to be the hero.
Until this year.
Yeah, Josh Allen realized he can't do it anymore. You got to stop doing it.
And he did.
Lamar Jackson was out there trying to prove something, and it cost him in a big way. And Mark Andrews, I don't know if he's going to be allowed in Baltimore anymore.
Oh, that poor guy.
I was watching that game with a friend of mine. They invited me for dinner. We're watching the end of it. What a great throw by Jackson. You got the touchdown. You just need 2 points to send it to overtime. I'm like, this is the season right here. Let's see what happens. I thought, I'm like, ready to go. Oh, no.
The announcer had called it. He was calling a touchdown. And then it was, no, he's dropped the ball. Oh, no.
And the worst part is
this. Oh, I like that was amazing watching that. I was in a bar, in a restaurant, watching that game on the big screen while having something to eat. And I almost spit my food out when I saw that. That was just unbelievable, unexpected, unbelievable. But David, can we agree? It is of these plays. They are few, but there's a saying, in some decades, days worth of events happen. And in some weeks, you have decades of events that happen. And that's what happens in the playoffs. In the short time that the playoffs are played, there are tons of reasons why teams lose and tons of reasons why teams win. But it boils down to key moments in a game. And unfortunately, history is littered with shoulda-bees, coulda-bees, didn't happen to bees. And then the ones that are like Kansas City, whether you want to define it by referees' assistance or the other team making mistakes, it really doesn't come down to just playing football. There's a big part of the game when it comes down to one game. You lose that game, you win that game, you move on or not. It makes every play in that game very important. And it's the sum of its parts, the game. And the biggest plays are the ones that we remember because it's easy to point to them as the reason why a team wins and a team loses. The second, the touchdown 2-point conversion attempt at the end of the game is an easy one to point out as basically the TSN turning point, if I can borrow TSN's term. That the game literally changed at that one single moment.
It did, and that's again, as a team, I don't know how many teams win making that many mistakes.
I don't know.
Right? It's just and if I was a Ravens fan, I'd been disgusted because this Ravens team, in my opinion, had the right pieces.
Totally.
They did a good job keeping the
Absolutely.
Bills in check. Josh Allen, everyone was kind of lauding him for that game. He played it the way he needed to. They were making mistakes. He's like, I can't make those mistakes. I'm not going to
That's
try
it.
not to.
That's
The
it.
Ravens, if you look at that game, if they didn't make half of the mistakes that they made, they win
Absolutely.
that game. They win it.
Absolutely. 100%.
As much as I would say, people say that's a good victory by the Bills. In my opinion, it's a worse defeat for the Ravens than it was a
Well,
victory.
that's a fair interpretation of what happens, but but at the end of the day, David, winning is what you do to put yourself in the position to win. You know, sports, the older I get, the more it becomes clear the definition of a winner can be irrelevant by by only a couple of changes or a couple of events. Even in other sports like hockey, for example, you don't you can always go through a series and you could narrow down many times. You can narrow down if it's even if it isn't a game 7 winner, right, which is easy because it comes down to that 7th game. But even in a series where a team wins 4-1, you can say that game where the team was ahead 2-1, it could have been tied, except that team didn't do it. They ended up at 3-1, and the other team only had to win that last game. And all the pressure was on the team behind 3-1 in games that forced them to play outside their game, which, we talk about every team, and let's going back to the NFL, each team has their character. They have their strengths and their weaknesses. It all comes down to how you deal with your weaknesses as much as it is dealing with your strengths and playing your game. And what we've seen here with Buffalo and Kansas City, they've been allowed to play their game. The other teams have not interfered with their game, and that's what's going to define that's what's going to define the Kansas City Buffalo game. Which one of those teams exercise their right to play their game? It's going to be about imposing your will. I mean, in the playoffs, I don't think there's a sport where the mental side of the game is so imperative in a one-game situation than the NFL and football. I don't think there is. There is no game. I would even say soccer. Soccer's a one-game thing, but it's so strategic. It's not as emotional as the NFL, football in general. And I admire the fact that these players, the part of the game in football that's so mental, you have to really, really be mentally strong to win. And we saw all this week. This week, we saw all the games gave us glimpses of that. The teams that wanted to have a game plan and wanted to play that game plan. The ones that played the way they wanted, they won. The teams that went in there wanting to play a certain way and were denied it, lost. At the end of the day, football, that's what it comes down to, imposing your emotional will on the opposition.
Oh, for sure. I mean, but that's literally every that's every year in the playoffs. This is why Kansas City has gone. Like, I remember last year when Kansas City played Miami in the playoffs in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Miami's like, we can't deal with the cold. But again, Kansas City knew that, and they knew how to beat them in those conditions. And so if I'm if I am a team, like if I'm Buffalo, your goal, as you said, and I think that's right, go ahead and show how you can knock the Kansas City Chiefs off their game.
They got the defense to do it, and the offense for that matter.
No, that's true. Yeah.
They've got the tools. I am a Kansas City fan, but I'm not worried about taking Kansas City's side. Even if they weren't that great a team, I still wouldn't worry about defending what's not right. Like I said, I agree about the calls that went Holmes's way in the game against Buffalo, and I got to tell you, that's something that both these NFC and AFC games don't have. They don't have. Neither team has a disadvantage due to the weather. None of the four teams, because you look at Philly and Washington, they're pretty close in proximity, and Kansas City and Buffalo are close in proximity to the elevation north and the weather everywhere where they are. So Buffalo's going into Kansas City. Snow is not going to be an issue. Cold, not going to be an issue. It's going to be all about how both those teams play within those elements equally, and both with a history to play in those kinds of elements. So we're going to see two teams that know how to play in this weather. So that's not going to be a thing. And I do believe that Buffalo really knows that this is not necessarily their last chance. David, we talk a lot of times about a team's window to success, window to championships, right? Well, I'm not saying it's closing on Buffalo, but the opportunity to win more than one Super Bowl is closing on them. It's not quite the last hurrah yet, but it is an opportunity to be a multiple Super Bowl winner, which I know it's getting ahead of myself, but I think you know what I'm saying. To be that dominant, to get it to dominate and beat Kansas City gives Buffalo a chance to go into a Super Bowl win and earn the respect that I think that team does. I think they are a team that's capable of winning a Super Bowl.
Well, I do think that, yeah. I mean, look, you look at Kansas City. It's a team that shows that, okay, they lost their first time against Tom Brady, but they kept working at it. They didn't let that phase them, and they didn't go far away from what the game is either. They maybe they retooled a little bit, but they stuck to their identity. And what Buffalo's got to realize here is, it's getting tougher to compete in this AFC. Teams are getting a lot better. And so, yeah, they got to understand that they're in a tough position right now. And they got to understand they're facing Kansas City every year, more times than not.
And the
You
rest
have to
of
be
the teams
ready
in the
for it.
AFC. And the rest of the teams in the AFC too, David, because as much as Kansas City's been very successful, the most successful, the Bills are another team that's been very successful, and they have a lot of teams that have a target on Buffalo's back, and they're going after them as much. Just because they haven't won a Super Bowl doesn't mean the other teams don't know how great a victory it would be to remove them from a playoff challenge next time this happens. Next year. So that's why I say the window's getting a little harder, because I mean the Ravens can't allow the weather to defeat them. They can't allow mistakes to defeat them. And I think they'll learn. Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the in the NFL, Canadian football in the brain again. And he may be MVP, which a lot of Buffalo fans think isn't fair. But what are you going to do? The guy's that good.
Well, that's it, right? I think you need to understand that this is for Buffalo. While Kansas City always looks daunting, they do have a win against them this year, and they've been in close games. I understand that Kansas City has had their number, but it hasn't been. There have been close ones, so
Oh,
you have to have belief that you can do it.
oh, I talk about Kansas City because they've won games they shouldn't have won. I think the same is true for Buffalo this year. At least 3 or 4 games they shouldn't have won. They did. Same thing. They know how to win. This is what winning teams do. They win games they're not supposed to win, that they don't look like they can win, and they end up doing it. That's why this game to me is so. I just can't wait to see this game, and I'm pulling for Buffalo as hard as I am for Kansas City, just because of the result of the kind of game this could end up being. This could be one of the greatest football games of all time, because it's going to take a really good play or a small handful of really good plays to determine which one of these teams win. It is a fantastic opportunity for both these teams to put on the greatest show on earth. I'll let you comment on that, but I want to also say the other game is diametrically opposed. You've got a team that doesn't belong there against a team that has a history of recent winning history in Washington versus Philadelphia. So you've got two different reasons. If you enjoy the underdog role, you've got a game you can enjoy. If you want a real, kick each other in the ass football game, you've got that too.
I'll look at it like this. If Buffalo or Kansas City make there, I don't think anybody questions whether they deserve to be there. I'll say that. But the other game, Philly and Washington, yeah, everyone's going to be totally against Washington, because how many of you are really going to be able to put in your faith behind a rookie quarterback? There will be some, because they liked what they've seen from Jaden Daniels, but not everyone's going to be on that bandwagon, I'll tell you that. And I'll be curious to see how this will how that play out. Like as a Cowboys fan, seeing the Eagles and Commanders with a chance to go to the Super Bowl.
That's where I was.
That's
the picture I have in my head.
It is the worst case. It's like if the Leafs were to watch Montreal and Ottawa battle it out with a chance to go to the Stanley Cup final. Like you can't. You would hope that both teams can lose, and that's just not possible. So you're trying to pick which is the lesser of the two evils. To me, I hate the Eagles with all my guts. I'm also just like, now I got to cheer for the Commanders, which is just not even. Like, I don't like cheer. This is why when it comes to the playoffs, when my team's not in there, I don't cheer for anybody.
Well, I have a friend who has been a Washington Commanders fan for the last 50 years. He has been a total Washington team before they were the Commanders, and now even when they're the Commanders.
You can talk. You can use the other name. It's fine. It's a part of their history.
That's okay. I'll choose not to at this time. I'm sure I'll say it by accident at some point. I probably have. I don't really hold I don't consider it something that I should be tarred and feathered for if I use the name at all. But I will say this. In conclusion, we've got a really interesting Super Bowl being set up, because imagine a Buffalo-Washington Super Bowl, David. Like the Kansas City Philly Super Bowl. I think we've been there and done that.
Yeah, please no.
Right?
No.
We've been there and done that.
No.
That won't carry the kind of cachet.
Buffalo, Washington, let's go. Please, for my sanity. Please. I can see Washington pulling it off, though. Dan Quinn knows Philadelphia very well.
That defense, they're ball hawks. They remind me of the Toronto Argonauts in championship football games. They make the offense make mistakes. And that's what Philly's going to have to. We're going to find out. If Philly's capable of not making mistakes, because I think if they do, they're going to pay dearly at the hands of the Washington Commanders. Totally.
And their quarterback is in hell. If they find a way.
Oh, if he's not totally healthy,
you're going to have to say, all right, we're going to have to find a way to stop the running back. That's the only grace the Philadelphia Eagles have right now, is they have the best running back.
What a running back.
Among the last teams, they got the best running back.
And I'm so grateful. What are you grateful for, Frank? I'm grateful that running backs are being respected again. There was a time, there were just the past few years, where if you were a running back, do we have to draft one? We don't really need to draft a running back, do we? They're not useful. Let's just use the 4 top guys we have. I'm so grateful that running backs are back because I love watching those runs. We don't see it with kick returns in the NFL because they've made it so you can't return a kick just by virtue of the rules, right? So if you love the run game in whatever way it manifests itself, you're left with running backs doing a great job. And Philadelphia does have one of the best and the most entertaining running backs in football.
No, they really do. And I thank the New York Giants for giving them that running back for free. Just let him go. Let him go. And it's funny because they constantly get reminded of that. And I'm just like,
ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this show today is David Morassudi's bitterness about the NFL and how they've ruined the Dallas Cowboys and their opportunity to look good, be good, and maybe they might get rid of the general manager. I really think I don't know if we should end it on a sour note. I think we should.
No, because the general manager says as long as I own the team, I'm the general manager.
I can see the root of your bitterness. I'm telling you, that's scary stuff. Well, you know what, David? It's been a lot of fun. We really are going to enjoy some football games this weekend. Football's still here. We still got 3 games left, and we've got the last 2 games to decide who are the 2 teams that play in the championship game, the Super Bowl. And we'll be able to enjoy the halftime show. And for those of you that already figured out what you're doing Super Bowl Sunday, I hope your parties are a lot of fun, and it's something that we really enjoy doing. Are you going to a Super Bowl party?
No, I'm probably gonna be working on the Super Bowl.
Oh well, I'm going to the 3rd annual Super Bowl party that I've gone to for years. I'm good for a few years. That I'm going to enjoy. It's fun being around with friends, and last year was hilarious because I was the only one in the room. 1, maybe 2. Oh yeah, my girlfriend was the other one because you're just rooting because everybody else was rooting for the other team, and Kansas City won. You know what that's like to be the only one in the room that's happy with the team that won? It's glorious. It's fantastic.
Everybody's like,
it's wonderful.
Who invited this guy here?
Thank you, Mr. Mahomes. wearing their colors, in there. Yeah, that's my team. Yeah. Like I deserve any credit. Oh, being a sports fan is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for doing this, David.
No problem, Frank.
I don't even know how long we've gone, folks. This app doesn't have how long we've been going. Do you know how long we've been going?
We've been going we're just over an hour and 2 minutes.
Oh shoot, we made it over an hour. My goodness.
Yeah, you got a party to go to, so we got to let you go.
Yeah, you're right. I got a party to go to. Hey, listen. He's David Morassuti. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. You've been watching Football Talk. As usual, we talked about the Canadian Football League. And for a couple of more weeks, we're going to talk about the NFL. And I got to tell you, folks, if you're a football fan, I always say when the Grey Cup's happening, it's the greatest game on earth. Well, the greatest league by most people's definition is winding down to the big game. And I got to tell you, this is going to be the second last week of great football that we have to watch. So enjoy it. Don't lose too much money. Don't eat too many wings. And don't imbibe too badly. And if you do, don't drive. Have a great time, everybody. See you next time.